Mentioned skills, which I think is so important. What types of skills do people need to be aware of when they're first getting started with some of this? Because this can feel extremely overwhelming, or it feels like, wow, I'm throwing my mom away if I'm throwing away the memory of homemade cookies. It's not. It's just something that happened. It was an event. It's past. All it is now is a fragment of your memory. What do people need to do? What kind of skills can they develop to start to address these things?
Yeah. I guess such a good question. The first skill I would say is willingness, like willingness to look at these things, right? Like you have to first be absolutely willing to question, right? And have these conversations with yourself or a friend or a coach or your journal, right? And actually be starting to get curious. That would be the biggest, like, second skill I would say, is like really embodying curiosity. The more we stay in curiosity, the less we stay in guilt and shame. Because that's our go-to. It's like, oh my goodness, this pattern developed from, this place. And then we start feeding that into our cycle of, well, it means I'm a horrible human being and I must be broken and there's something wrong with me. Right. So we need to get out of that. And we're not ever going to heal from that energetic vibrational space. And we need to get into curiosity, right? Just being kind of curious, like, oh, like, how did that show up in childhood? And, oh, like, how am I using sugar today? And just starting to be curious about, just thinking back, where did that come from? Like, when was the first time I felt that? Or when was the first time that I noticed that, I always bake cookies for this person or what have you. So curiosity and that willingness are really important, like, internal skills to really start cultivating in your life, right? Starting to ask why, starting to just ask questions without judgment, and knowing that, we're all imperfect, and that's what makes us perfect, right? Like, we've all got something, myself included. I am definitely still working on lots of things. So building that. And then I would also say the skill of sitting in silence is big. This is a big one that I'm really tapping into, especially the clients that I've been working with the last year and in my own journey, is we cannot hear our true selves when we are living busy lives. And we are all living busy lives. So we have forgotten to pause. And what is happening is we are being trained out of ever trusting ourselves. So what we're doing is literally looking to everyone else, doctors, the government, the medias, movies, food companies, these podcasts, books, YouTube. We're constantly outsourcing ourselves and our decision making. And what I'm really passionate about is helping people reconnect with their inner knowledge, right? You can call it your intuition, your gut, your higher self, your spirit, whatever you want to call it. But essentially it's this really deep knowing and truth of like who you are and what works for you, right? And this is where so many people, and like you mentioned earlier, we do live in this really cool age where we're not relying on the government, thank goodness, to tell us what to eat and what not to eat anymore. But we can then become so easily overwhelmed, right? There's so much information. There's people, even in the sugar addiction space, there's people saying different things, right? In different pieces. So the way through that is actually listening to yourself. Like, you'll know in any moment if what somebody says, if what I'm saying here is connecting with you or not. And there's no one right answer. If you're not connecting with what I'm sharing, no problem. Like, move on and find that person or that message that does resonate with you. So how can we learn to really trust ourselves again, right? And trust our inner voice that ultimately always knows what's right for us and always has the answer. And we have to make room for stillness and silence, not just, sitting, listening to music, right? Like, this is a big piece. Most of us don't have any silence in our day. Even when we sleep, maybe there's noise going, right? So really starting to cultivate that habit, skill, whatever you want to call it, of having some time in your day where you are just with yourself. And most people will feel a whole lot of terror and resistance to that fact, because it is very uncomfortable to be with yourself if you have never done it before. And it's also absolutely amazing and beautiful once you actually start building that relationship with yourself. But having that space for your inner voice to talk to you or to communicate. And it cannot happen when there's music on and podcasts on and the TV on and people yelling at you and your kids running around. It has to be in this quiet space. So this is where obviously this huge movement to more people meditating and more people hopefully getting out in nature and all of these beautiful things is really important. And you can cultivate that in your own way. I mean, you can literally have lots of clients who just go sit out on their deck in the morning with a cup of tea, right? And just sit with nature and, spend 10, 15 minutes there just to start their day with themselves and listening to themselves. So that I'd say is a really important skill. I would say that's probably the first place to start for anyone. And when you notice the resistance, journal about it. Why is it scary for you to sit with yourself? What are you afraid you're going to learn? Most of us are terrified. We're going to learn something about ourselves, or some truth is going to come out. We're going to have to think about that time that person hurt us. We're going to have to feel that again. And yeah, we do have to do that. That is how we get through this. That is how we heal through this, is by getting these things out of our body again, and no longer keeping the lid on, right? Like we're all this, can of soda, right? That's just like been shaken with the lid on and just gets shaken every year, especially the last 2 years. We've all been shaken a lot. And we need to make sure that we have a way to release that in a healthy way, right? And learning those skills as well, which are nuanced and different for everybody, but learning, how to really support yourself in that. So I'd say those are the most important skills. There's so much that we can do, but I think it's all about how you approach it, the willingness, the curiosity, and that learning to really sit with yourself, have a practice every day. It doesn't have to be formal meditating, right? You can literally just sit on your deck with a cup of tea and be with yourself, right? Yeah. And be present with that.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned silence specifically, because that's such a challenge for me. And even before this interview, like an hour before this interview, my phone was about to die. So I had to make a choice. Do I crush another 2 or 3 episodes of your podcast, or do I take my phone inside and let it charge? So obviously I had to let the phone charge, but sitting there with like no phone and nothing to do, it's a little bit uncomfortable for a little while. You forget, like every 10, 15 seconds, like, oh, let me check. Oh, nope, I can't. Well, I'll play. Oh, nope, I can't do that. Like, it's crazy how much time we spend, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to listen to lots of podcasts and books and music that you love, but we do it all the time. And I see that in my life all the time. I never have a moment where I'm not doing anything, not just not doing something, but not listening to something and allowing that silence.
Yeah. Well, there's your homework, Casey. And welcome to the club. This is like,
so
this is our, that's okay. I can support you with it. But it is really important. And it is, I thank you for sharing that. Like, it is really uncomfortable. We've all gotten in this habit where we, like, our phone is our third arm, right? And even if you're like on the bus or sitting, waiting for someone, I still struggle with that too. I noticed that too. Like, oh, I want to grab my phone. I actually just got back at the time of recording this, I just got back late last night from a 4-day yoga retreat where I like totally disconnected from my phone. Yes, I did take some videos and photos and stuff, but it was just so freeing to kind of have that little like digital detox. And that might be something, anybody relating with this, I know we're talking about technology, but it's all related, right? Because it does pull us in. And what is actually happening is it's actually pulling us out of ourselves. Right? We're no longer then present with ourselves. And we've gotten so out of the habit or out of even knowing how to be bored. Right. And this is a big trigger for a lot of people to eat. Like, oh, I don't know what to do with myself. I better eat. That was a big one for me. Like, boredom was one of my biggest triggers, emotional triggers for food. It was like, I'm bored and lonely. Right? Like, what do I do? I'm going to eat. So it's a practice. Like, it's one of those, like, it's like a muscle. It's like building a muscle, right? This ability to just like be at peace, sitting, waiting for the bus for 5 minutes, like just observe, listen to the birds, like focus on your breath, like, just take a minute. And I think that this is a huge contributor as well to the huge rise in anxiety and mental health disorders that we're having as well, because we're so ungrounded. We don't know who we are. We're afraid to be alone or without our phone. And we're just constantly in this state of anxiety, scrolling through Instagram, getting dopamine hit, and it's really perpetuating that vicious cycle of, eating and trying to cope, right? We're all just trying to figure it out. And, the answer is actually really simple. And it's really about coming back into yourself and spending more time, like in stillness, right? And in silence, if you can, right?
I love that. I think of my annual backpacking trip where you go to a place where you don't have a signal anyway. Yeah. And so you're not using your phone and you start to tune into all these things around you that a lot of them could kill you at any moment. If a boulder rolls downhill or a bear eats you or a crazy ass lightning storms get up there. But you learn that everything is already kind of going. Life is being lived all around you and you get to appreciate it a little bit more when you're not constantly distracted. So I absolutely love that you made that point. I definitely want to go back to support. I think this is so important. And I love that this is your line of work and you get to offer this to people. And again, we think of people like friends, family, the people closest to us. they're going to be so more than willing to help us on our journey, and they will do anything that we ask them to. And that is often not the case, is it?
Nope. Very, very rarely. And it's such interesting because I approach everything in my life now as like a learning lesson, and I see everybody in my life as just a mirror showing me, some of the, like, showing me how I'm showing up and what maybe I need to work on. So, I've developed that view, and it's really serves me, but it is really fascinating to notice exactly that, like, where are our expectations going into this? First of all, expectations are the root of all suffering. I definitely believe that. Miscommunicated or uncommunicated expectations, I should say. But yeah, we go around expecting like, oh, my husband's going to be really supportive, or my kids they're all going to do this with me. We're going to go off sugar together. Right. And that's usually not the case. And what I see going on here, so many things, obviously, I just recorded a deep dive episode on this, but I really think it's important to highlight that, this journey that we're all on is our journey. And we have to start, unraveling our codependency in a big way that we have with our friends, our family, our husbands, our spouses, our kids, right? And expecting them to do what we want to do, right? And this really is coming back to our own connection with self, our self-confidence, and being like, okay, I'm going to do this for me, and I don't need anyone else. Yes, we can need support. We can need things from other people, but we can also stand in our own decision, right? And this is where, like, really being in our power is important, being like, I'm going to make this decision for me. And I hope my family and friends are going to be supportive, and I'm going to do the best that I can do to communicate what I need in terms of support. And if they're not going to support me, then I'm going to navigate that in a different way as well. Right. I mean, it's so nuanced for everybody, but it is really important to recognize that most people are not where you are right now, right? You got to the place where you were in so much pain, or so ready to just finally feel better, get off sugar, and not be, at the mercy of this toxic substance anymore, that you want to go on this journey. Doesn't mean that everyone around you is at that same spot, right? Everybody's on their own journey and their own timeline and their own different place in life, right? So it's very rare and very lucky if your husband's also on board, right? Or your family's all going to do it with you. But don't let that be something that deters you. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just going to wait for my husband to be ready, right? Or I'm going to wait and you're going to be waiting forever, right? This is like, that's codependency right there. Like, you don't need him or them, right? You can totally do this on your own, and you can totally manage. I know this because I've seen hundreds of women do this, and I'm sure you have as well, Casey, right? Like, we can't wait for someone else to be ready, because we're just essentially doing ourselves a disservice in that, right? And we may be waiting years, right? And then there's going to be resentment in that relationship, and it's just going to create toxic energy in any of those relationships. So going in, not expecting that, right? And also, yes, to some degree, I mean, we should be able to expect our friends and family to at least, like, support us and encourage us, right? But the reality is that most people don't realize, they think they're supporting, but they're not. They're not, right? There's a really big, subconscious phenomenon going on when we change. It really triggers everybody around us. It may trigger, and it's really, really common. I see this in like 90% of my clients, that it triggers your friends and family, because when you get healthy, it shows them that they're not, right? And this is very subconscious, subliminal ego stuff, right? Like, when you change, it threatens their survival, right? And it threatens their view of you and themselves. And they might start judging themselves, right? And they might start judging or, worrying about their health, and seeing you do this amazing thing for yourself and really honor your health in a big way can be inspiring. But most people actually get stuck instead in the, like, trying to pull you down mode. And this is all very subconscious, even if your friends and family are, saying all the right things, but then in the second breath saying, oh, don't be so strict, or just have one. Or I have a client whose family is constantly telling her she's too healthy. Stop being too healthy. Come on, live a little. And like, these sorts of things, right? That are just like coming from love, but misguided love, right? And they can really affect us, especially in the beginning of your journey, right? In the first couple months of really doing this healing work and maybe getting off sugar, you're really self-confident, right? Or self-conscious, right? You're not sure if you're doing it right. There's a lot of like, you're not really grounded in like, yeah, I'm doing this, and this is my new self, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, and it's really important to surround yourself with people who like are going to support you in that. And if you notice people aren't, there's a couple things you can do, right? You can get better at communicating what you need from them and let them know how that's making you feel, which is a great opportunity for you to practice some of this like feeling stuff. Or you may need to distance yourself from those people, right? And that's a very real thing. I've had to go through that myself in really switching friend circles, that I outgrew the people that were no longer supporting me in the way that I needed for my growth. And that's okay. I grieved through that. I cleared all the stuff that I had around that and moved on. So sometimes that's what we have to do. And it's a really tough pill to swallow, but hopefully you don't have to do that. But it is sometimes a part of the process, right? And knowing that you're worth it and knowing that this is important to you is ultimately what matters most, right?
That's right. You learn who the true friends really are, because they will be the ones to support you. And it's like part of it is like telling people, like, don't tell everybody what you're doing. Tell a few people maybe what you're doing. It's like if people start doing time restricted eating, people go bananas over that and say you're going to die or this is the worst thing. And it's like, wait, where were you when I was slamming 2 pizzas and a 6-pack of beers every night? Like, what?
Right.
You didn't care then. Why do you care now?
Right. Yeah, that exactly. That's such a great example of that. And I think it's also a really beautiful opportunity to reflect on where we're not communicating effectively, because so many times, like, we'll think that, well, I've asked them to support me, or I've told them what I need, but we haven't. I mean, most of us don't know what we need, right? Like, have we been clear and said, please don't bring sugar into the house? Or are we just like, can you please support me? Right? Like, I don't know what that means, right? We have to be clear. And first we have to get clear for ourselves. What things do I actually need here? Right. And how do I ask for them? I mean, that I think is the difficult part for a lot of people, is like, how do I ask, my best friend to not meet for coffee and cake anymore? Can we go for a walk? Right. Or, and exactly like you said, it really does shows you who's there to really understand and support you, and who's going to show up for you in that way and lovingly accept you versus, who's maybe not in a place to do that. Right.
That's right.
And, it can be a tricky, like, side byproduct piece of this work. There's a couple of them. I have many clients who have actually, in this last program I had 3 clients quit their jobs because they realized, oh my goodness, this is not what I want. This is a ripple effect, right? For when you really connect with your truth. So, it can be tricky, but it is really important to acknowledge the goal here, right? That this sense of peace and freedom and really fully living life. And it's just, there's no words, right? It is so worth it. And it's so important, and you deserve it, right? We all deserve to live life fully and not be asleep, right? Be in this like mundane life and be in this guilt shame cycle. There's actually a way out. There's actually another way to live. And, hopefully I can be one example of that. And there's many other examples of that. Like, this is not, well, this is my life and I have to deal with it. This is an opportunity for you to really start, taking the life that you deserve, right? And going after it.